Welcome to the inverted upside down. You're listening to Paranormal Now with Alan B. Smith, rebroadcast on the UNX network Thursdays at 11 p.m. Pacific, Fridays at 2 a.m. Eastern.
However you are and whenever you are, welcome, good souls, to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith. Join us as we traverse the cosmic highway of paranormal portals and tantalizing turnoffs. And joining me tonight is a special guest and seasoned paranormal investigator, Heather Taddy, known for the TV shows Paranormal State on A&E, Alien Highway on the Travel Channel, and so much more. And we'll discuss everything from the effect that a paranormal encounter can have on a person to the merging of high strangeness and evidence-based reality, which is what she specializes in. Heather gets out there, boots on the ground, and does the investigation. And so she has years of knowledge that we'll be talking about tonight and lots of freaky experiences. If you are a fan of Alien Coffee Bean Coffee like I am and you want the Mystery 20 discount, just go to aliencoffeebean.com. In the discount section, type in Mystery 20 and you'll get 20% off the Alien Coffee Bean Coffee, which I live and die by. It's funny, we got sick last week and the one. And that was really intense. And it was the first time I probably didn't have coffee for, it was a good 2 or 3 days. But finally, when I had that first cup of coffee, it just kind of brought me back to life again. But that was intense. I've never drinking so much tea in my life, but I'm feeling much better now. And just a lingering, really not fun chest cold thing going on. But otherwise, the worst of it is over the fevers, the shivers, the aches, which were really intense. All that's gone. So super happy and just grateful to be as healthy as I am right now for both of us. If you have not subscribed to this YouTube channel, go to youtube.com/mystery lounge and click the subscribe button. And also please click the notification button so that way you don't miss a show. As you know, we do have the occasional pop-up episode or special guest on this channel. So if you click the notification bell, you won't miss any of those episodes. All right, let's get down to it with our guest tonight. Paranormal researcher and investigator Heather Taddy is known for her work on A&E's hit television series Paranormal State, which is based on real-life investigations from the world-renowned Penn State Paranormal Research Society. While studying film and French at Penn State University, Taddy trained as a field investigator for PRS while also traveling the country, helping families living in haunted houses. She's known for isolating herself in a haunted location, which she did recently on her YouTube channel, most active area, while documenting her experiences. Taddy has worked alongside the legendary Lorraine Warren and was inspired to join PRS after attending one of her lectures. Taddy teamed up with UFO researcher, investigator, former law enforcement officer, and leading cattle mutilation investigator Chuck Zukowski on a journey to search for definitive proof of UFOs alongside America's Alien Highway. Together with Chuck's son, Daniel Zukowski, they pursue cases that authorities ignore, find the evidence that others have missed, and interview witnesses that are otherwise afraid to come forward. Alien Highway premiered June 12th, 2019 on the Travel Channel. And let's welcome Heather Taddy. Heather, welcome to Paranormal Now.
For quite a while.
Oh, say that again. I had you muted. I apologize.
Oops. Oh, I said thanks for having me. I've listened to your show for quite a while.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That means a lot coming from a seasoned paranormal investigator like yourself. And, you've been doing this for a while. So how did you get involved and why did you even think about joining the Paranormal Society in the first place?
Oh, it's a pretty it's a pretty fascinating story, how I found out about the club and everything. But I mean, as long as I can remember, being very young, I've always been into ufology and the paranormal. It's always been very intriguing
Mhm.
to me. And I remember in elementary school, we had these like book fairs, come through town. And I was always the
Mm.
only girl that would be ordering the alien abduction books. And so my teacher started calling me an alien. And it's just something like, to me, the two most profound questions you can ask yourself is, are we the only ones on this planet?
Right.
Do extraterrestrials exist? And of course, what happens when we die? Do we have that ability to communicate after we pass over? So those are just things that have always been really intriguing to me. And when I was young, I got into the Ouija board. I grew up in the middle of Pennsylvania, and I kind of had to create my own entertainment because there was really nothing to do. So
Mhm.
I stole my mom's video camera, and my friends and I would go out on these excursions to these like haunted locations. Sometimes we'd actually like break into these places, and and
Yeah, I've heard that story before.
yeah, that was the way to do it, because I've always been so intrigued by it, and I always wanted to
Yeah.
have experiences, and I've always wanted to put myself in a situation to have an experience and have my
Mhm.
beliefs challenged. So that's what my friends and I would do. I would always be leading them on these excursions, and we'd come, we'd encounter cops, and they would see a Ouija board in my car, and
Mhm.
automatically, they'd kind of go into a story about their own experiences with the Ouija board. Um, but yeah, I started investigating in my early teens, and I just got into it for the thrill of it. And then
Yeah.
I went to Penn State University, and they had believe it or not, they had a student run paranormal club that was backed by the university. And it was called the Penn
Mhm.
State Paranormal Research Society, or PRS. And I had done my first 2 years of college at like a branch campus before I went up to the main campus at Penn State. And I remember one day I was sitting down in like the student lounge to study for a French test. And literally on the table, there was an open spread about this club and about a conference that they ran called UNIVCon. And it was like the Halloween edition of like the school newspaper. And it was literally just opened up to that page. And I was like, what is this? There's actually a paranormal club at a university that I could join and go on
Yeah.
investigations and travel and stuff. So I saved the article, and the following year, I told myself I'm going to go up there and join this club, and I'm going to train and be an investigator. And in the meantime, Lorraine Warren came and she spoke at my college, and I had grown up reading about her and Ed. They were really pioneers in this field. They had been
Mhm.
investigating this phenomena since like the 1940s, and I always was intrigued by their, case files and everything. So I went and saw her speak, and it like blew me away. I couldn't even believe it. I couldn't believe her stories. I couldn't believe like how amazing she was, and the photographic evidence that she showed, and just like the kind of the way she went about figuring out a haunting. I just thought it was very interesting. So a year later, I transferred up to Penn State to finish my film degree, and I just started going to these meetings every Sunday. I didn't know anybody. I just went, and it was they had their meetings at a building on campus, and I remember I would always like illegally park to go to these meetings, and like I'd be in there hoping that I didn't have a ticket on my car. But
So you break into homes and you illegally
yeah,
park
right.
anything.
I'm just such a
Yeah.
rebel. But yeah, so I just started going to these meetings. I knew nothing about a television show at all. I
Mhm.
started going, and it was a big group of people, probably like 15 to 20 people. Um, we would sit at these tables facing each other, and we'd talk about our experiences growing up. We'd talk about, UFOs, cryptos, things like
Yeah.
that. And cryptids, I don't know why I said cryptos. But we would just have these really unique conversations, and everybody was very unique. And just started going to every meeting every Sunday night. And about the fifth meeting in, I noticed a new face in the room, and there was a producer there who he just had this stack of these pamphlets. And at the end of the class, he was talking about how A&E had been in the process of creating like a docu-series where they followed this club around on weekends when they went to help families that
Mhm.
lived in really haunted houses. So they started putting up these flyers all over campus that basically advertised, the appeal of being able to go to really haunted places in the world. And of course, I was like, sign me up for that. So I filled out this pamphlet. I kind of actually forgot about it because I was really busy with school. And at that time, I was training to be a field investigator. And it was a really kind of tedious process because you had to write all these research papers. You learned about demonology, psychology, famous cases. It was very fascinating. It was very much, I was basically adding another class onto my curriculum that I really wasn't getting credit for, but I was so passionate about it that I just stuck with it. And the class had like a 75% dropout rate. And I stuck with it and aced like all my tests and everything. And then I got a call that they wanted to cast me for the show. And I was like, okay, so yeah, let's do it. So then these producers, I remember they came to my dorm and they were like filming me in my apartment and
like a test.
And then yeah. So it happened so quickly. And it was definitely an interesting college career for me, college experience.
Yeah. So how does a producer find out about a college paranormal society?
Good question. So PRS had in State College, where Penn State is, in 2001, there was a very famous missing persons case. This girl named Cindy Song went missing on Halloween night, and it was all over the news. They still have no idea to this day what happened to her. But there was a student named Ryan. He's the one that started PRS. He started the club in 2001, around at the time that this happened. And he contacted local detectives and he suggested that the police use a psychic to try to help and find this girl. So they brought in a psychic and it was all over the news, all over the media. And it turns out an Emmy Award-winning producer found out about the club through one of the articles. So that's kind of how they got into the spotlight.
Wow, that's really interesting. So when they were putting you all together, were you all friendly with each other already? Did you have a rapport?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, I had met Katrina Weidman, who is very well known in the paranormal field. I met her in the club one day. I just walked in and I remember I hadn't seen her before, and I sat down next to her, and I remember she had these really crazy red shoes on. I was like, I'm going to sit next to this girl. And we became best friends. I've known her ever since that day when I met her in the club. And we were kind of the only two that stuck through the training. There was like one other person, but they cast us because we had really got along. We clicked, we had chemistry. And then the four other main people that were cast had been in the club for a very long time, basically helped found it. So it was interesting. I remember the producers, at the time I had played in this experimental rock band. I'm a musician. And I remember the producers thinking that was really interesting. They just thought I was really interesting. And I was definitely the kind of person that got into this field for the thrill of it. So I remember them being really excited about me, and I had the film background. So my role on the show, I kind of fulfilled every role that there is on an investigation team, but my main role was team documentarian. So I would film sort of the behind the scenes, things that would happen with us when the cameras weren't rolling. So a lot of the stuff I filmed, they used for the show and for behind the scenes. But it's really funny because the original concept of Paranormal State, first of all, it was going to be called Paranormal U. And the original concept was they were going to follow us to parties and then follow us on these investigations. Then they wanted us all to hook up and date. And they wanted it to be more of that like college atmosphere. And I'm so glad that it didn't turn out to be like that, because I don't know if I would have been into that. But
no, because then they would have had to work really hard to get y'all to behave in certain ways or act for the camera, and it wouldn't have been as natural.
Yeah. And it kind of, the direction of the show went that way because one of our first episodes that we filmed for the series, we helped this mother, and one of the line, we did like a little conclusion at the end of the episode, and one of the lines she said something like, you guys are really helping, and I don't think you realize how much you helped me. So that's kind of where the direction of the show headed then, is more so focusing on helping families.
Yeah, I think that's something that it's funny. I think when did the show start? 2006 or 7?
2007 it premiered.
2000. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And today, that's an element that's really missing from paranormal television and entertainment, is the subjects, the people who have the experiencers, and that the very personal, emotional side to all of this. It's not just about bumps in the night. This is an experience that they go through, and you as a paranormal investigator get kind of close to them. You rub up against their feelings and their psychology. Did you ever work on a case where it got a little bit heavy for you?
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, with all of the cases, I mean, there's usually when you're working with clients, there's usually always a psychological factor involved, and there's definitely trauma. You deal with a lot of heavy subjects, and a lot of the early PRS cases, we picked them because they were very serious. Sometimes there were children involved, and it just seemed like we really focused on the families that truly needed our help. And a lot of the early cases that I was still training on were more towards the demonic nature and oppression specifically. So there were a lot of really intense cases, and some of the early ones I didn't go on because, I was still going through the training process, and I wanted to get more comfortable with the whole idea of that. But, being in college and going to these families' houses, we would go for the weekend or, like 3-4 days. And then going back to class and going back to your regular life and thinking, did I help this family? Are they still terrified? Are they feeling comfortable in their home? What was the result of us being there? And it was hard to not think about that when you're like, in the middle of college, studying for a test. So it was kind of always in the back of our head, but we got really close to a lot of families. And to this day, I always tell people that I kind of have a family in every state, of the episodes that we filmed. So.
Right. Well, I mean, I do get the sense that you actually care. On occasion, there are people who just want to thrill, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that if we're going to get to the bottom of what's going on here, you have to understand the emotional element. Because I'll ask you, do you think that spirits are hanging here for emotional reasons, or what is your inkling? What do you suspect the reason is that ghosts are still lingering?
I have a couple different theories. I would say that one, I feel like sometimes spirits manifest to someone who they can like emotionally connect to. I've seen that a lot in cases, whether or not the person that's deceased had kind of a similar experience to the person that now maybe lives in their home. I've seen that a bunch. Other than that, I just think it's residual energy. It's energy that's kind of caught in a loop, and it's it's hard because not every case is the same, and everything is still kind of like a working theory. So there's so many different. The cool thing about being on Paranormal State was I feel like I'm very well-rounded when it comes to this subject now because we had so many different unique cases, and working with clients is like it's like a whole other level, because we were saying earlier, there's always like a psychological factor involved. The emotional state of the person is very involved, and there's always like a human emotion that plays a role in a haunting. So I would say it's a variety of things.
Do you see a difference in yourself now from those early years of investigating, how you approach or, work as an investigator?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the main things you have to have in this field is patience and very good observational skills. You have to be good with, especially if you're working with clients, talking to people and kind of knowing what questions to ask and knowing how to feel knowing how to make someone that's going through a stressful situation comfortable. And I've always been pretty good at connecting with all kinds of different people and, making them feel comfortable talking to me. Because a lot of these people have had these intense experiences that they haven't told anybody because, obviously for fear of ridicule or,
Sure.
feeling like people won't be able to understand. And the great thing about PRS is we went in there with, we put our beliefs at the door and we went in there and we just focused on the people and their story and we made them feel very comfortable. I think I just rambled off and forgot what you originally asked me.
Well, you've evolved. How have you evolved as an investigator? Yeah.
I would say I'm very good now at kind of going into a location and feeling out the energy. And before I kind of struggled with that, but after you do it so many times, I can go into a room and you can just feel a heavy feeling if something traumatic has happened there. And I'm very, I feel like I'm very good at that now. Other than that, I would say just when working with clients, just picking up on their energy and, obviously knowing what questions to ask them and just observing their environment. Cause that's key. Because a lot of times if you're going through something very stressful, that can contribute to a haunting in the way you might not realize.
Right.
So we've seen that a lot with clients.
You and Katrina, have you remained friends consistently over the years?
Yeah, we have.
That's great.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I remember meeting her in the club, and then afterwards we just kind of talked outside for a while. And I remember thinking she's going to be one of my really good friends, and here we are. Years and years later, almost 20 years. I want to say that's crazy.
Yeah. For anyone who's not familiar with Lorraine Warren, what is it besides the Amityville home haunting? What is it that made the Warrens so big in the world of the paranormal?
Well, with their story, art. They were both artists, and that was kind of a stepping stone into their paranormal research. And they lived in Connecticut, and they actually, I love this story. They would actually go to haunted locations that they had heard of, and they would stand outside, and Ed would paint this like amazing portrait of the house, and he would give it to Lorraine, and Lorraine would go to the person's door, and they would kind of use that to try to get into the house and try to get the owner of the house to tell them about the history of the house and what they experienced in the house.
That's clever. Yeah.
I know. And the paintings, you should look them up. The paintings that Ed did were really, really amazing, really creepy haunted houses. But, they were really great people because they would take calls, at 3 a.m, and they wouldn't charge people. They wouldn't ask for money or anything. And they would just dedicate their lives to helping families that were living in haunted houses. And they would go in and feel out the place and just try to stay. They would bring their team in, stay overnight, and try to help them. So they had been doing it since the 1940s. And then, of course, in the late 60s, they would lecture at college when kind of the interest in the occult sprang back up with like Ouija boards and things like that. So,
so you studied demonology. Do you believe in demons?
I do. Yes, I do. I definitely believe, and I used to not, until I got in this and I saw things happen that just I couldn't believe. But I definitely feel that there's evil out there, and everybody has a different way of looking at it, different cultural views on the demonic. But I definitely, I do believe in it.
So when we say demon, are we talking about something other than how Mia, being raised as a Catholic, imagines a demon? Or how do you define a demon?
So I would say it would be considered an inhuman spirit. So something that has never walked the earth before. That's kind of, I grew up studying Ed and Lorraine Warren's work, and that's kind of how they view it. So they kind
would that be any sort of entity from another dimension, or is
it's kind of hard to explain. Trying to think the best way.
Because I often imagine that sometimes these high strangeness experiences are these kind of interlopers coming from another reality, parallel reality. So if they cause harm, does that mean that they're a does that make them a poltergeist? Does that make them a demon?
I think when I think about that, I think that one of the huge misconceptions in this field is that like people think everything is demonic, and you see that on some shows today, and that's really not the case. I think that people kind of there's also very negative spirits too that I found that basically like going into clients' homes, you get a feel because the activity is way more intense, and there's like a checklist of things you kind of have to look for. It's always centered around a person, and the phenomena is just a lot more intense than just like a regular haunting, if that makes sense.
I think so. We're going to take this first break. When we come back on the other side of the break, we'll continue the conversation with Heather Taddy, and we'll have to ask her about a recent investigation on the YouTube. What the YouTube channel is that a shared channel? Is it Katrina's channel? How do we?
It's Katrina's channel. Yeah, Katrina Weidman at YouTube. Yeah.
Okay, so if you want to go and check out that channel, Katrina Weidman on YouTube, for a recent episode called White Hill episode, which I started watching, which is very interesting. We're going to discuss that and so much more when we come back on the other side of this first break. This is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now on Mystic Lounge YouTube channel, rebroadcast on the UNX network, 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Fridays. I'll see you on the inverted upside.
Are you ready? I am the ocean and you are the sky. I need to swim free and you need to fly. I live for daylight, you live for the night. You love to wander and die.
This coffee is delicious. Is that a UFO? I'm actually seeing a UFO. This coffee is awesome. That's why they call it alien coffee bean. Is this even made on Earth? Hey all, Paranormal Now will be syndicated on the UNX network, the new mainstream, where you can find your favorite hosts and shows on the cutting edge of ufological and paranormal news and topics. Listen for Paranormal Now rebroadcast on the X at 2 a.m. EST Fridays, 11 p.m. PST Thursdays at unxnetwork.com.
I've been living in beautiful chaos, feeling at home only when I get lost. I'm a mess, but a hot mess, dreaming with my eyes open. I'm a mess, but a hot mess. I'm not scared of being broken. I've been going and I don't wanna be found. Go on and I don't wanna be found. I live for the night.
Welcome back to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith, your most grateful host. The bumper music tonight, taking us out of the break, is music by Lizette Xavier. If you want to find out more, go to lizetteXavier.com. We are here with Heather Taddy, a preeminent paranormal investigator. Heather Taddy, welcome back. All right.
Hello.
Now, I really am curious about your belief in life after death, because, and we'll continue talking about the demons, but oftentimes when psychics come on the program, they have a certain understanding of what they perceive to be the afterlife because they're communicating allegedly with spirits. But those reports are often, they're different, similar, but different. As a non-psychic, but with an intuition that you've mentioned to develop over time, have you learned anything about the afterlife that you suspect of what's to come?
Well, I think that besides like natural explanations for things, like I'm very like when I go into investigation, I have an equal balance of skepticism and belief. And I've always felt that there's a lot of different things that can be mistaken for paranormal that people kind of overlook. But I mean, I would go back to saying the idea of residual energy. I think that, when we look at why places become haunted, there's always some common factors. Whereas there's a very traumatic event that happened,
Mhm.
a very quick traumatic death to where the person kind of doesn't know what happened or they're very confused. And, that's their home and they kind of stick around. I've seen that a lot. Other instances, I feel like they're just kind of trapped in a loop and they're not moving on. But I just attribute it all to different kinds of energy.
Okay. So are we trapped in a loop right now?
That I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm kind of trapped in a loop or I'm on another realm or something. So I don't know.
Well, you do have the Stranger Thing lights going on in the background.
I do,
So
yeah.
you're kind of bringing that forth. Are you a Stranger Things fan?
I am. I'm not caught up though on the current season.
Oh, okay.
I
Then I'll
have a
be
lot of
careful.
catching up to do. But yeah, I think it's great. I love the 80s vibe to it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And also the great thing about those kind of shows is that you don't have to have cell phones. So it kind of it makes it a little bit easier to tell scary
Mhm.
storytelling. It's kind of like the X Files. Like if you imagine, Mulder and Scully had a iPhone with them everywhere they went, we wouldn't have quite the mystery. So
Right.
I appreciate how they embrace that. Um, but the writing and the character development is really, I think, what's the best part of the show.
Mhm.
Um, not necessarily the villain.
Yeah, I need to catch up. It's on my list.
What season are you on?
So I only made it halfway through season 2.
Okay.
So I have a
All
lot of
right.
catching up to do.
Yeah, it evolves. It really does.
I've
And
heard.
to see the characters grow and the new characters introduced, it's brilliant. Yeah. So okay, demons, you believe are real. I am not sure how I feel about all that because I am not a religious person. So is there a non-religious context for a demon?
I think so, but the way I was kind of trained, I kind of followed the Warrens' view on it, which a lot of people don't agree with, because
Mhm.
they are really heavy on their religion. But the reason for that, from their view, is that that's what it responds to. So I've always kind of followed that, but I didn't really have a view on it until I started doing like the early serious cases where it usually involves someone. Maybe when they were young, they did really negative things or they made a pact with the devil or something like that. And they kind of never really closed it. And then
Mhm.
later in life, they get into drugs or really negative things. And that kind of makes them vulnerable to these types of things.
Have you ever done anything yourself that you regret? Meaning, Ouija board or some sort of seance or ritual spell, anything that you've experimented with?
No, I kind of stay away from doing any kind of rituals or spells. That's not really my thing. But growing up and using the Ouija board, I never really had any intense experiences with it. And
Mhm.
my view on it is, it's a piece of cardboard. People put this extra meaning on it, but it's all kind of about your intent and how you go about using it. But it's with everything in the paranormal, whether it's EVPs or having seances, you don't know what door you're opening up. You don't know what can come through. So it's all kind of a risk. But something about the Ouija board has always fascinated me, the idea of spiritualism and how that kind of led to paranormal research. And just the
Yeah.
idea of trying to communicate with someone that has passed away has always been really intriguing to me. But my experiences with the Ouija board, I had one interesting one. My cousin and I would always play it growing up, and our grandmother had passed away, and we were very close to her, and we would try to contact her on the board. And again, when you're using a Ouija board, you don't know what you're coming through. Things can mask themselves and become more serious. But the Ouija board told us this piece of information that we didn't know. And so we went to our moms and we're like, the Ouija board told us this. And they were kind of like, it was a very private piece of information. And we told our moms and they were like really amazed. They're like, there's no way you could have ever known this.
Right.
So that was one weird thing that happened. But my friends and I would just take it to abandoned buildings where we kind of knew a little bit of the backstory. And, you know, of course, when you use a Ouija board, there's two theories to it. There's the automatism theory where you're kind of subconsciously moving the planchette and don't realize it. And then there's the spiritualist theory where you are communicating with a spirit or entity. So I'm kind of, I can kind of see both views of it.
You use different methods now. You use the spirit box, for instance. Have you ever used the Estes method versus the standard spirit box method? And is either one better than the other?
Yeah, I have. I've done a lot of different things. The spirit boxes are interesting to me, especially when you can kind of get like a full sentence or something odd that really relates to what you're asking. So I do like messing around with it, but I don't really put a lot of my trust into any kind of equipment because, again, I don't think there's any type of equipment that's going to prove whether or not these things exist. It's just kind of something. Yeah, it's just kind of something that to kind of help us collect data or maybe see patterns, or just, I see it more as like kind of, I don't want to say a toy, but it's more entertaining. So a lot of the equipment I'm not really big on. Of course, I'll use it on like when I do public ghost hunts with people because it's fun to see what comes through, but I don't put a lot of my belief into it. One of the pieces of equipment that I always kind of go to is an EMF meter, like a tri-field meter, because it's very important to rule out any kind of natural, appliances or things that are giving off energy, old wiring in houses people may not realize. But, and to me, the most amazing evidence is a voice that you catch on an analog or digital recorder. I've been in so many instances where maybe like 2 or 3 people are in a room. There's no outside noise. It's completely silent. You're asking questions, you're, just having normal conversations, and you play it back and you hear a voice, say something very specific, or it's very clear. That's pretty hard to disprove. When something like that happens, I'm like, well, so like a recorder is kind of my main use of equipment, and of course a video camera. But the Estes method, it's a fun thing to try out. Again, especially when you get like a voice or something that specifically comes through, and you can't really hear what I'm saying.
Right. So you don't think that the equipment's that important, but isn't collecting the data like the first steps you have to take to come to a conclusion?
Definitely, yeah, totally. Like thermometers are, temperature readings, barometric pressure. A lot of times people have experiences when it's really humid, and that can, of course, so things like that I think are really important. But like more of like the really fun, like the forms of like ITC, like the spirit boxes and things, I don't really put a lot into it, but they're fun to use, and a lot of people get a kick out of it. But
EVP is more clear. It's a more direct response.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. I mean, if you ask a question, or even if you don't ask a question, right? I mean, if you're in a space and all of a sudden there's a voice that appears on camera, I guess the first thing you have to do is try to rule out any outside source or contamination.
Right. One time, one of the more recent, really great EVPs, maybe like 2 years ago, I was at Malvern Manor with a small group of people, and one of the spirits there said to be a little girl, somehow connected to the property. I think she lived across the street, and she would come over to the property. And one day they found her, somehow she went into a closet and hung herself with a jump rope. I'm not sure how that happened or what she was doing, but that's one of the more well-known deaths there. And I was with a group of people in a room, and we were trying to connect with this little girl. And I don't remember specifically what we asked, but in one of the breaks, you hear this little girl's voice say, "Mommy," like it sounded just like that. And we kept replaying it and trying to figure out, were you talking? Were you talking? And
Right.
I think I was in the room. I was the only female in the room. You know, they were all guys. And I was like, you guys, no one was talking, you know. We had multiple recorders. I think someone was filming it. So we would try to review that footage to try to figure out what that voice was. It was just so clear and distinct.
Yeah.
But when something like that happens, it's like, and you can't explain it. It blows your mind.
Is that proof for you?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, when I can't figure out where this random voice came from, I would say it's some pretty good proof.
Have you had voices that respond directly to your inquiry?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I remember. Let's see. The Washoe Club, which is a haunted like brothel saloon in Virginia City, Nevada. I remember being there and trying to use trigger objects like a cup of whiskey. And I remember asking specific questions that didn't just deserve like a yes or no response. It was more, you know, asking like a very specific questions. And I think we got get me some ice come through. And then we went downstairs and brought up ice. So I've had a lot of instances with that. We're using some kind of like trigger object to like elicit a response. And it's been very relating to it had related to what we had asked. I've had that happen a lot.
How do you know what the trigger object is? Do you know someone was a drinker in a past life, or how do you make that decision?
I think we kind of usually just go by what documented history we know of, because I mean, I do a lot of research going into cases to where, you know, I have articles, I've documented deaths that we know of. We know of people that would frequent the place, maybe cause trouble. And I think we had a specific person picked out and in that specific room we were in that we kind of like tried to contact.
Yeah, so you don't just go into places willy-nilly. You do your background research before.
Yeah, I usually always do. And it's funny because on Travel the Dead, which is the most recent project I've been working on, we did our first episode at White Hill Mansion in New Jersey. And we decided to do a little twist to where Katrina knew the location. She had been there several times and she was going to take me there to investigate. But the whole spin on it was she wasn't going to tell me where we were going. And I had never heard of the place. I didn't even know we were in New Jersey. She just kind of took me across the bridge from Pennsylvania. And I was like, we're in New Jersey.
White Hill Mansion, where is that?
It's in...
Like near Trenton or...
Oh, gosh. I want to say Fieldsboro, if that's a place.
I don't know.
Something like... I don't even remember, honestly. But that whole... Our first little episode was... taking someone in who's used to knowing the history and researching and kind of seeing how, you know, going into a place and knowing specific history about it and knowing who lived there, how does it affect the investigation not knowing all that information? Does it kind of like give you like a preconceived belief of what you're going to experience? So it was kind of like a different way to do things because I'm so used to doing tons of research and knowing things. So it was kind of cool to go into it with no background. And
you were by yourself.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was just, there were three of us and we did solos where we went in with our camera girl and then they left and we would go in by ourselves for a couple of hours and just feel out the place. But I was really impressed with myself because not knowing the active rooms, I just directed myself to the rooms where I felt something and I had spent a lot of time in, and I started to pick up on things, and all the rooms I hit on were like the most haunted rooms in the place. So that's an example of how I've kind of grown in the field and you know, the more haunted places you're in, you kind of pick up on things a little bit more.
But when you were there by yourself, right? For one night?
Yeah. So what we did was there's like a trailer on the property. And when I was doing my solo and she was doing her solo, everybody was out of the building. So we were basically just locked in. And in front of White Hill, there's a huge like fence with like a padlock. So no outsider could have like, you know, snuck in or anything. So we were pretty much in there alone.
Pretty isolated. Yeah. And when you were in there, that object that was on the floor, Do you really think that that moved on its own?
The crayon, yeah, I mean,
Oh, it was a crayon? Okay.
yeah, so it matched the sound perfectly. And the floor, we tried to zoom in to catch this on camera, but the floor, it was in the attic and it had kind of like a bumpy texture. And,
Mhm.
as
Yeah.
we were looking around to try to debunk things, we realized the table next to us, none of us were moving to try to shake it or anything that it would have made that sound. And we noticed the crayon on the floor. And I remember during my walkthrough, I had remembered seeing it. But none of us were close enough to it that it would have moved. So it matched the sound perfectly. So I don't know what else it could have been. So that was kind of our theory, that maybe a child or something in there kind of psychokinetically just like moved this object.
Right.
Never,
Yeah.
you never know, because there's no way to really prove it. We didn't get it moving. We just got the sound.
Which brings me to my next question. And what's up with creepy dolls?
You mean in that?
You found a really creepy one too.
I know, yeah. So I think the deal with Whitehall Mansion was that a lot of people would bring in donations of creepy dolls, and it's funny because I used to work for this woman that collected dolls, and she had this insane doll museum, and she had dolls from the 40s, the 30s. So I kind of got used to identifying dolls and what year they're from. But I think people mostly use those as trigger objects to try to get something to happen.
A trigger object to get a spirit in the space to respond?
Right. Yeah. Like say that was a doll that was in there originally, which I don't think any of them were. Since there were kids involved, we know there were spirits of children involved. Maybe that's something that they could relate to, that we could try to use to get them to either move or try to just ask questions to try to get them to kind of get in that space and make something happen.
Yeah. All right. We have a question from Rodrigo, and it is: has Tally ever had an experience involving ectoplasm and materialization in general? I hosted a show recently about it, and I'm curious how often it comes up.
No, I mean, that would be incredible. I've always loved looking at those old photographs of the mediums at the seance tables, and you just see the crazy. Yeah, I love that. But from what I know, from what my psychic friends in the field have told me, that's a really rare occurrence. But that would probably be at the top of my list for something to witness. But I have not experienced that yet in my journey.
Yeah, I think that some of those fake spiritualist photos, combined with Ghostbusters, there's this idea that ectoplasm was a total fabrication and that it was not something real, but that's not necessarily true. There are people that still experience something like that, right?
Yeah.
But if you do have an ectoplasm, if you do have some kind of material that is manifesting, is there no way to capture that? Is there no way to get a sample?
I mean, in the more serious cases, I haven't been on these ones, but just from my colleagues that have, there was one specific case our club did in the early days of PRS that turned out to be a really serious demonic case. And there's actually a book based on it. It's a house in Pittsburgh on Brownsville Road. And the book is called The Demon on Brownsville Road. It's a very interesting story to where this house, it had a history with Native Americans being buried on the property. And there was a doctor that lived there that used to perform illegal abortions on people. And so it has this really intense back history. And they would have this substance. It wasn't blood, but it was this substance kind of bleed from their walls. And I'm not sure if they took it to get it tested or anything, but in more serious demonic cases, that's referred to as apports, where it's any kind of substance. It could be vomit, feces, anything, blood. But I know on some cases, some documented cases, people have taken it in for testing and it's been blood, and people can't really explain how that happens.
Right, which is problematic because if you're trying to prove the case, any skeptic can just say, well, somebody put blood on the wall or somebody put,
exactly
on the wall. Yeah. So I guess the testing is like, oh, is there something in this? Is there something in this compound that is foreign that shouldn't be? But
Right.
that's led us to nothing yet so far. Um, do you think that we will ever get to the point where ghost investigations will get the same sort of credence and serious take by the government like we see with UAPs? Or is that like way out there?
I'm not sure. I've never actually thought about that. I feel like, the scientist's take on it is for something to be truly real, it has to be capable of being like duplicated over and over again under scientific conditions. So, of course, you'll sometimes you don't know what's going to happen when you go into a place that's supposedly haunted. You could be there for a week and clients could be living there and experience something every day. You bring a team of people in and nothing could happen. And, we've had a lot of cases where we've had cameras set up and last minute we decided to maybe move an angle of a camera. And then lo and behold, overnight, something flies off the shelf or something happens and we didn't get it on camera. So
Yeah.
I think you have to be very lucky to actually catch an apparition or something. So it's very tricky to kind of always get evidence.
Do they think do you think they know what you're doing?
I don't know. I've thought about that. I've always thought like, you go into a house where the people that lived there, maybe they died in the 1950s and you go 1950s, 1940s, and you go in with all this crazy equipment and all these things blinking, and you go in with a camera crew and you're like very demanding and you're asking, do this, do that, do that. I always wonder if that's like kind of disruptive and confusing for the spirits or whatever's there. I've definitely thought about that. And maybe that's why I think that the equipment, I think people sometimes can put too much focus on equipment and they can miss things that are going on around them. We see that a lot, and one of the things I always like to do when I go into a haunted location is I like to just go in and just go into each room and just sit there for like 5 to 10 minutes and just take in the space. I feel like a lot of people don't always think to do that. They just kind of go in thinking, I'm going to see a lady in a white dress, and they just set up all their equipment and they focus on that so much that might not even be a thing that happened there. It's just years of a story could kind of manifest, and you kind of go in thinking and expecting to have that experience. But I just think it's really important to like observe your surroundings and not put like a ton of focus on the equipment.
Okay, fair enough. I have a private message question. Heather, do you think of the ghosts as the quote souls spoken about in religion?
Yeah, I kind of differentiate between ghosts and spirits, as spirits are kind of the soul of a person. Spirits, they communicate with you. There's more of an intelligence to it. They know you're there. And they kind of travel around a location, whereas like a ghost is kind of more of an energy that's kind of stuck in a repetitive pattern, like the guy down the hallway that roams the same hallway, does the same motion of maybe waving or grabbing something. They don't really interact with you. That's kind of how I differentiate between the two. But, the great thing about this field is everybody has, different experiences, different beliefs, and someone else may have a very interesting theory that kind of goes with what they have experienced. But that's kind of always what I've thought and how I've kind of differentiated between the two.
Well, that's a good point. People do, when they visit, certain haunted locations where it's said a ghost can be seen, walking down the hallway or appearing in your bedroom,
Right.
fairly regularly, and yet people can't capture it on camera.
Mm-hmm.
It's gotta be frustrating.
It
What
is.
about
It's very frustrating.
the laser grid? Do you have any more success with that in catching something?
There was one incident where I actually used one down a really long hallway. I remember it was kind of the first time I ever used one. It was a case on Paranormal State, but I can't remember which one. But I remember we saw a shadow like move the light. And there was only a small group of us and no one was moving or anything. We tried to recreate it and we couldn't. But I feel like those are kind of fun to utilize in investigation, especially if you're working with like really long hallways or just to use in any kind of room, because when something moves, I mean, you can obviously tell. You notice it.
Have you ever just been scared out of your mind, like just startled by something?
Of course, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, this wasn't televised or anything, but one time I was in Las Vegas for work, and I noticed I got this Airbnb that was actually themed. It was like a 8 apartment complex that this girl had turned into these very unique Airbnbs where each one had a different theme. And I remember I rented out the Pee-wee's Playhouse themed
Of course you
Airbnb.
did.
And
That's awesome.
I had to. So I was there and I was laying on the couch. I was reading or something. And I kind of got this weird feeling to where I was like, okay, there's just like a weird vibe in here. And I remember there was a front window with a curtain. And I had noticed that the curtain moved as if someone was just standing there looking out the window from inside. And I saw that and I was like, that's weird. So I immediately went over. I didn't see any air vents. There was nothing natural that could have caused that. So I kind of kept that in the back of my mind, thinking, okay, is this place haunted? I don't really have any idea what has happened here. So then 2 nights later, I stayed there for about a week. 2 nights later, I woke up in the middle of the night. And this has never happened to me. I woke up with this intense feeling that something was in the hallway watching me. And I had to go to the bathroom and I froze. I could not get up. I didn't have any weird dreams. I wasn't experiencing sleep paralysis. There was this just intense feeling that I could not describe, that there was something that was in the hallway that was like coming towards me in the room. And of course I didn't see anything, but I had this feeling. And for me, very odd for me to wake up in the middle of the night and just immediately have those intense feelings. So my friend was with me and I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything to them. I just kind of kept it to myself. And then the next day they told me they felt the same thing. They just didn't try to wake me up or say anything. So one of the nights in the next unit next to mine, I asked the maid, I was like, hey, do you know anything about this apartment? I had a really weird experience last night. And she immediately like almost dropped her broom. And she was like, that's one of the most haunted buildings in our complex. A man died a very intense death. She wouldn't give me like much information, but she just said that a man died there in the 70s. And oftentimes when people rent out that room, they leave in the middle of the night. And to me, I was just like, wow, that kind of confirmed my feelings, but I didn't have any other experiences. But that was the first time I ever had that happen to me.
Wow. Okay. So we broke the rules and went over our time for the break. So we're going to take the break now. But hey, we're with Heather Taddy, so why wouldn't we? This is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now on the Mystic Lounge channel. We'll be right back on the other side. We have so much to cover. Heather, I mean, you've investigated everything. And we haven't even touched on aliens. So we'll touch on that when we come back on the other side of this break. This is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now, rebroadcast on the UNX network every Friday night, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, a.m. I will see you on the inverted upside down.
This coffee is delicious. Is that a UFO? I'm actually seeing a UFO. This coffee is awesome. That's why they call it alien coffee bean. Is this even made on Earth? Hey all, Paranormal Now will be syndicated on the UNX network, the new mainstream, where you can find your favorite hosts and shows on the cutting edge of ufological and paranormal news and topics. Listen for Paranormal Now rebroadcast on the X at 2 a.m. EST Fridays, 11 p.m. PST Thursdays at unxnetwork.com.
Welcome back to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith. Thank you for hanging out with us tonight. Taking us out of the break is music by Septembrio. If you like their music, go to Septembrio, spelled with a y.com. And Michael Eight's music is also featured in the Half-Light documentary, which can be found on this channel, and soon, hopefully, will be on YouTube and other streaming platforms. I'll keep you posted as that news comes in. We are with Heather Taddy, paranormal investigator, but again, she does so much more than just ghosts. But before we talk about aliens, Heather, you were mentioning earlier about the Ouija board and how what you overlay onto it kind of affects what you get out of it. And then I was thinking, could you not apply the same philosophy to your approach to demons or exorcism? Is it that the Catholics have just been doing it for so long that they've developed these rituals, and the intent of a God, of a goodness, is what's actually more powerful, and that you could do an exorcism, or you could expel a demon using other methodologies?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of how to go about answering this.
without upsetting too many people.
Yeah, it's hard because again, everybody has a different belief system, and they have different views on these things, and it's tough. I just know with the experiences I've had, some of those early PRS cases, there's like a different intent to things that would happen. It was much more, what's the word I'm looking for? It's just a whole different vibe with the more serious cases. And I think that sometimes applying that belief, it was a way to get rid of it. Applying the Christian belief to it was, the way to get rid of it. It's just kind of what I saw with it, and we'd follow back up with the families of these intense experiences.
Okay. So aliens, you were on a show called Alien Highway. What is the difference for you when you are investigating extraterrestrials or something like Skinwalker versus, a ghost investigation? Is it any different?
For me, I kind of always, before doing Alien Highway, I kind of always separated UFOs from ghosts. I always kind of thought they were separate things until, we did a lot of different cattle mutilation cases where, these ranchers, their cattle would die mysteriously, and there were a lot of similarities between the way in which these cattle would be found, ways in which they died that people just could not find an explanation for. And a lot of times when ranchers would have these experiences, they would see a ball of light in the sky, or they would see what they would think was a UFO. And then they would go into their houses, their ranch houses, and they would have paranormal phenomena happening, much like they were living in a haunted house, and stuff like that had never happened before. So I think there is a connection between everything, and I kind of came to that conclusion after doing the variety of cases I did for Alien Highway. I think there's a connection with time, with ghosts were seeing something from the past. And of course, with abduction cases and people see UFOs, they often experience missing time. There's a correlation with shadow people where people have, thinking their house is haunted, they see a shadow that might resemble an alien or something like that. So there's definitely been a correlation. I also think that there's a correlation with EMF as to where, you have these mutilation sites where sometimes there's remaining traces of EMF where the animal has been, and also where maybe a craft has landed, there's like residual EMF. And then of course, all the theories in the ghost world, I'll call it, with EMF are that, is high evidence of EMF of like a cause of ghosts or vice versa. So those are kind of the connections I've come upon, but it's definitely interesting to throw myself into alien and UFO investigations because I'm so used to working with clients and being in a very like small constricted space in a residential home. And now, with Alien Highway, I had to think about environmental factors and the geology of certain rocks and weather conditions. And I think there's a much more danger to those types of investigations because to me, it's more scary. It's scarier because you don't know the intent of these things. You don't know what's going to happen, of course, in this whole realm of the paranormal.
Is that because they're less human?
Yeah. And to me, like reading about the abduction cases is just like so bizarre. And the fact that like the animal mutilations occur, it just seems like it's like more violent in a way. And it's hard because, when you're in a haunted location, you can kind of just go directly to the phenomena. Whereas when you're out in the middle of nowhere and you see a light, it's just kind of like, okay, you see it, you look at it through night vision binoculars, and then it's just like, what do? You just document it. So I don't know. There's just like a higher level of fear to me thinking, about extraterrestrials.
Yeah, on the CW Mysteries Decoded with Jennifer Marshall, it seemed to me at least that you have spent quite a bit of time thinking about cattle mutilations. What do you think's going on with that?
Oh, that's always been like the trickiest evidence for me because it seems to happen a lot. And what is the correlation between seeing the lights in the sky? Like, why is that happening with these cattle mutilations? Like, why are the two connected? So I've always been, on a journey to kind of find the answer to that. But just like the ways in which the animals are found cut with these like surgical incisions, the blood being removed, there's gallons of blood in a horse. Where does all that blood go to? There's no signs of struggle. There's no sign of a predator. Sometimes the bone is like perfectly clean and white. The jaw is stripped of flesh in a very straight line. The organs are often cored out. So it's just like what is doing this? Like what predator is doing this? And I'm sure there's some instances where it could be a predator, but I feel like most of them it's so bizarre in the way that they are done that, people have always connected it to aliens because they're seeing things in the sky that they can't explain around the same time.
Right. And we see that with Bigfoot too. We see that with some of the other entities.
Yeah.
You mentioned time. Obviously I'm not a physicist, but according to Einstein, time is a dimension in and of itself, this time-space continuum. And so in theory, you can move through that dimension. And I wonder if that's the connection between these phenomena, in that whether it's an extraterrestrial or it's some other kind of interdimensional entity, that they are utilizing that dimension in a way that we are, incapable of doing or even understanding really at this point. Which is to say, the alien doesn't have to know what Bigfoot is doing. They could be two totally separate cases, but they're using a similar method through moving through space-time. And maybe that, for us, appears like there's this relationship, but maybe there's not. Maybe they're just using a similar tool.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because you hear with some Bigfoot incidences, you hear that people see them and then they just suddenly disappear. Like they'll look away for a second and they'll be gone. So I've always kind of followed, I've always really been interested in John Keel's theory because I feel like it really makes you think and question things. But I've always kind of felt that maybe an explanation for this stuff is maybe there is a window area, you know, more so in certain specific places in the world, but to where these things can kind of pass through and we just happen to catch it. But again, it's like, how do you prove that?
Well, I guess you go out there and you bring your equipment and hope for the best.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Have you caught anything over the years where you're just like, wow, that's awesome. I'm so glad we got that.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of there were a lot of weird things I saw filming on Alien Highway that I couldn't explain. You know, in Sedona, which, you know, Sedona has a reputation of being very well known for this kind of activity, to where they have like nightly UFO tours because people always see things there. And you know, we kind of made the connection, or do the vortexes have anything to do with this activity? Is it releasing some kind of energy? Is it the red rocks? Is it any kind of geological factor with the surroundings in Sedona it's causing all this activity? So I remember when we were there, we went to this place called Bradshaw Ranch, which I think back in the 50s, it was a Western set for movies. It was like a movie set. And Elvis had actually filmed a Western there. And we went there and the skies were clear right above the kind of like the mountain ridge. You could see what looked like, it just looked like a planet appeared, but it was bright red. And it just appeared. It was stationary. Everybody saw it. And I just kind of looked behind me for a second to see everyone's reaction. And then I looked back and it just disappeared. But we caught it on camera. So that's something I saw in Sedona that I was kind of just like, what was that? You know, because we knew the flight patterns, you know, we knew it wasn't a satellite. It wasn't a star. It was bright red. It just looked like a planet, just disappeared, appeared and disappeared. So.
Right. And speaking of appearing and disappearing, on the Mystery Decode episode, you were looking for a hidden base.
Yeah.
Do you believe these stories of Dulce, New Mexico, and other locale where there's these apparent alien bases?
I mean, I feel like there wasn't enough evidence, because the whole story of Dulce Base, you know, it was rumored because of what a man named Paul Benowitz was seeing. And this is such a fascinating story. And I feel like we should have touched on this more in the episode, but for those of you
that's a big bag to unload, though.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You did interview Rick Doty, which I thought you did a great job. You asked some great questions. And Rick was actually on here a couple of months ago. And
was he?
He's a mystery within himself.
I know. I know. I mean, there was so much stuff that didn't make the episode, because I had a notebook full of questions, because I was like, okay, I'm really going to test this guy, and I want to ask him all the questions to see what he says, because I followed him, you know, and I wanted to see if his story stayed the same. And it's just so weird, because how do you believe someone that's trained to lie? You know, his goal was to infiltrate UFO circles and spread disinformation. So it was really kind of hard to take seriously what he was saying, but it was probably, of all the people I've ever interviewed, one of the most interesting. But getting back to the base, I don't think I necessarily found enough evidence to believe that there was an underground battle and there was like a genetic engineering, human experiment things happening. Like I don't think I believe any of that. I don't think there was enough evidence to kind of back up that theory. But the people in the town, we couldn't deny this, that the people in the town, generations and generations of people living there, have always seen things that circle around the Archuleta Mesa. They've seen things go behind it. They've seen crafts look like they go into the mountains. So I really kind of wanted to find out why this area is such a huge focus for that kind of activity.
In the episode, there were some drone shots, thermal, a sensitive drone, and just a regular drone shot. And of this, it looks like a long, tall door almost on the side of this mesa. Was there a reason why the drone couldn't get any closer in there, or is it off limits? Because you went to the top of the mesa.
We did, yeah. We drove a Jeep up, which was a really interesting experience. And also too, like, to think about it being a base, I couldn't imagine someone driving up that every day. So to me, there has to be some kind of helicopter like landing pad up there, which we didn't really see evidence of. But the geologist told us it was volcanic rock, and it would kind of be difficult to build a base within the mountain. But I don't know. I don't really know why the drone couldn't reach in there into that. I don't know why it didn't get closer.
Okay, yeah. But the idea of an underground base would be that there would obviously, it's a secret, and obviously you would not want your front door advertised.
Yeah.
So I suppose you can speculate that there's actually some door in the middle of the desert somewhere, where people go in and then they just take a long train to bases. I mean, we hear stories about this, about these underground railroad systems and that sort of thing. Do you really think, I'm asking as if you actually believe this, I'm not saying that, but do you believe that the US government does have alien recovered technology or craft that they are experimenting secretly on different bases?
I do kind of believe that they have reverse engineered craft, and they've hid it from us. I definitely think that that's possible. I'm not sure exactly where. You know, a lot of people obviously say Area 51, Los Alamos. There's all kinds of different stories circulating around. I don't think we'll ever really know where it would be. You know, because why would they want the public to know that? You know, that would just cause a frenzy. So I definitely think it's possible. And I definitely think it's possible that we know there are underground bases. You know, Cheyenne isn't one example. So I know that those exist, but for me to think that there's, a secret race of aliens living under a mountain that we don't know about, I don't know that I can get behind that.
So does that disclude ultra-terrestrials? This theory that there are earthlings of a different kind living side by side, but we just can't see them. They're on this planet. Is that something you entertain?
Yeah, I mean, I think that whatever is here, I think it's something that's been with us since the beginning of time. And one of the reasons I say that is because, when you look in caves all across the world, there's evidence of this stuff in petroglyphs, which to me is some of the most astounding evidence. Is you see things that people are seeing today, and people back then, why were they drawing these on caves? So that's one thing I've always kind of thought, that it's something that people have been seeing since the beginning of recorded history. And as to where it is, I don't know. I don't even know if I believe it's whatever it is from space. It could be something that's maybe in the ocean. That would make sense to me, because there's so much ocean that is undiscovered, I guess. And that seems like a plausible theory to me, but I don't know. I mean, sometimes when I'm out, I meet people, I've come across people to where I'm like, is that person an alien? Because they're just there's something off about them, So I've definitely have things like that, to where I'm like, that person's not from around here or something. But
right. Yeah. I've had a couple experiences like that. We have a very personal question from Ufi, and is Taddy wearing a mood ring?
I sure am. I'm a big fan of mood rings, and I don't remember where I got this mood ring. I actually think I got it in Sedona, now that I think about it. But I'm a very big fan of mood rings. And I haven't been paying attention to notice if it's been changing. But out of all the mood rings I've ever had, this one is always changing. So, yes.
All right. And if you're just tuning in, we're with Heather Taddy, paranormal rebel, and TV star of many a show. Now, Skinwalker Ranch. This is the first episode of Alien Highway. You guys get kind of close to the actual Skinwalker Ranch, but in reality, it's not limited. The phenomena is not limited to the borders of that ranch. Did you get a sense that there really is such a thing as a Skinwalker? Because we know the Native American legends, the Ute tribe and all that. But there's a difference between myth and legend and modern day observation.
Yeah. Yeah, first of all, people think you have to be on the ranch to experience something. And although we got very close to the ranch, that whole Uinta Basin has a
Mhm.
history of this phenomena, like going back to the Spanish explorers. They would see things above their campfires. So it's nothing new. Why this ranch is such a focus is obviously due to the curse that the Navajo put on the Utes, and they say that this ranch is the direct path of the Skinwalker.
Mhm.
We interviewed someone actually in our episode that had grown up in the area, is very well versed on the area and the terrain and everything. And he told us this amazing story that he was driving down the street and he saw a wolf that was bigger than normal, but it almost looked like it was the same height as him, just sitting down. It was this huge wolf. And that's something, people that have reported seeing the skinwalker is that it has transformed into a wolf. That's one of the most common stories that people hear. So he saw this, and then he said he got into his car and he was driving, and another incident was where he saw, it almost looked like this Native American, how did he describe it? This figure walking over this bluff that got into his car, and then he experienced missing time. And the next thing he knew, he ended up driving miles and miles away, and that the figure, whatever it was gone, and he experienced missing time, and he just woke up and he was like, what happened to me? So he kind of thought he encountered a skinwalker. It was a really fascinating story.
That is. So he picked up a hitchhiker. Is that what he thought he was doing?
Yeah. And he's in our episode. He's a very logical person, someone that you wouldn't think would make up something like that. And he was very detailed in his description and very smart guy. So, I don't know. I thought his experience was pretty genuine. And that's something that people have reported for a very long time.
I'm just going to jump back to ghost investigations real quick. When you go into a home, have you ever played the bass?
No,
No?
I haven't. No,
You've
because,
never used your music to try to connect, with.
I've definitely used music, but I've never really traveled with my bass or thought to bring it on investigations.
Mhm.
That's a good idea. I remember one time on Paranormal State, we investigated this haunted horse ranch in Texas, where this rancher was having all these experiences where his horses were dying in weird ways that the vets couldn't explain. And he claimed that like this 500-pound trough where they fed from like slid across the ranch, and they couldn't explain it. So he had all this like really weird activity in his ranch house. And I remember one of the nights we were there, we had these speakers and we were blasting just like Native American drums and we had a fire to kind of see if we could have any kind of experience or if that would trigger anything. But it turns out, our theory was that he cut down cedar trees, and that's considered to be really disrespectful to the Native Americans. So we kind of came to that conclusion that had an effect, because he noticed when he cut down all these cedar trees is when this activity started, and he had never had any experiences prior. So when we left, I remember we planted a tree to kind of give back to the land. But the music part, we kind of used that to try to trigger something.
Yeah. Okay. Rodrigo asks, has Taddy read Hal Puthoff's new article for Cosmology magazine? I suppose referencing ultra-terrestrials.
I have not read that yet. I should make note of that. So.
Yeah. Rodrigo, if you can find a link and share it in the chat, I'd really appreciate that.
Yes.
And we have a comment from Muddy Buddies. Brother, I listen 10 hours a day on Pandora. At work, love the show. I've had experience in a house here in Ashton. Look into the church. I'm not sure what look into the church means. Are you familiar? Ashton, Michigan?
No, I'm not. I've never done an investigation in that particular town.
Okay. So yeah, you're based in Pennsylvania, correct?
Pittsburgh, yep.
Pittsburgh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what states do you spend the most time in outside of Pennsylvania?
I feel like recently I've spent a lot of time in Arizona, New Mexico, California.
What's the most haunted state that you've been to?
That's kind of hard. I don't know if I could pick out the most haunted state because I feel like there's bits and pieces in every state.
Of course,
So
yeah.
I feel like, I don't know, Nevada sticks out to me because I feel like there's a lot of different haunted places there. But most haunted state, I'm not sure if I could kind of pinpoint that.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking people, I would say New Jersey, where I was born and raised.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love New Jersey, but there's a reason we live in New York State now. We also had the New Jersey Devil growing up, which you also have done an episode on.
I did, yeah.
Yeah. Where did that take you on the search for which I would argue is myth or folklore? But what about you?
I was never really into the cryptid cases that we had done. They were always like really fun to me, but it was always hard to try to catch evidence and prove things, obviously. So I love reading about those kinds of things, but it's not something I normally investigate. But for Paranormal State, I did have the chance to go to the Pine Barrens to search for the Jersey Devil. And
you were in my hometown stomping grounds area.
Oh, yeah? Yeah. It was an interesting place. I remember Bill Burns was there from UFO Hunters, and it was pretty cool to work with him. Okay, pretty cool to hear his theories. But I remember production had this really silly idea to make Katrina and I kind of walk through the Pine Barrens with slabs of raw meat and leave them places to try to see if that could make anything happen, which I remember doing that thinking like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. Like, why am I doing this? Yeah. But two of the investigators on my team actually caught some interesting evidence. I mean, to me, it looks like a deer, but this is what I can't explain. There's something on its back that's giving off a different temperature reading through the thermal cam. And we kind of couldn't really explain that, but it looks like a deer to me. But that's kind of what we caught in the episode. Other than that, I don't think we really experienced much, but it was fun.
It's fun. Yeah. For me, obviously growing up with that, I mean, we were running through the woods, literally searching for the Jersey Devil when we were kids, So even though I don't necessarily believe the Jersey Devil is a real beast, it definitely has a special place in my heart. And I appreciate, there are investigators in New Jersey that
What happened?
I don't know.
We started talking about the Jersey Devil, and the next thing you know, the screen went blank.
Yeah, either that or was my comments about New Jersey and something. So, okay, well, let's move on from the cryptids, and I do want to get back to aliens again.
Okay.
Do you believe aliens are visiting Earth?
I do. And again, it kind of goes back to, even in the end of the 1800s when there was a big UFO flap, people were to report seeing these cigar-shaped objects with like blinding searchlights. And if you think about it, at that time, the only lights available were like dim incandescent lights. So those are kind of things that make you kind of question, like, why are so many people reporting seeing the same thing? And a lot of it actually correlates with things that people see today.
I appreciate Graham Hancock's research and others as well, beginning with Terrence McKenna, looking at the psychonaut experience, what people see on different psychedelics. And, Graham Hancock in his book, Supernatural, postulates that perhaps back in the day, people were doing psychedelics in caves, and that's where we get these like geometric patterns, and they see these entities that people see today on psychedelics as well, which are also similar to alien abduction experiences, which is a very bizarre coincidence. To me, that argues that, like you said, there might be some other something connecting all this together. What's your take on that? And have you ever done a psychedelic yourself?
I have not, actually. That would be pretty interesting to do. I kind of never went down that road because I feel like my mind is already kind of weird and crazy. So I've never kind of went down that road. It's kind of scary to think about, but I don't know. That's an interesting take on it. That it's true, maybe even with Native Americans, there's always a link to areas with UFO activity that connect back to Native Americans, Native American land. And you think, like, did their ceremonies draw something in that made the space very sacred, that, they were able to communicate with these beings? I feel like that's always, a direct connection with it. But it's just, it's so interesting to see the different drawings and things, petroglyphs that you find in caves, and to think, like, why did they specifically draw that, and how is it that exact thing is what people are experiencing today, like all over the world?
Yeah. When you were younger, did you ever have any dreams or imaginings that you look back on today and it connects to the work that you're doing now, and you're kind of surprised by that?
I would say not really. My dreams have always been very, like, surreal and odd, almost like a kind of like a very abstract painting or something. I don't know how to describe them, but
like a Salvador Dali kind of experience.
Yeah, like I've always had a very strong imagination growing up, and I remember there was a hill outside the house I grew up in, and I remember just my friends and I would always look at the stars because I grew up in the middle of the woods, and that's what we did. And I always found that I would sit there and just kind of like imagine what it would have been like if a UFO came down and like took me away, So I always had that imagination. But as far as dreams go, a lot of times my dreams don't even really make much sense. So I don't really put much meaning on them, but I wouldn't say that they directly correlate with what I do now.
Okay. And Rodrigo just shared the link. It's the Journal of Cosmology.com/putoff. Okay. So that's in the comment section if anybody's interested. Yeah. Rodrigo, he is very active on Twitter, on social media, and is always up and up with the latest of paranormal and ufological research. It's really cool. I appreciate that, Rodrigo. Yeah. Right. So now for me, I had an experience witnessing a UFO, but it was one of those simple experiences. We kind of see it in the sky. It streaks across the sky, it stops, streaks across the sky, it stops, takes off in the like a shooting star in the opposite direction, which at that point it's like, oh my God, what did I just see?
Right.
Have you witnessed anything like that?
Yeah. So I don't know if you've heard of this place. It's called ECETI Ranch out in Trout Lake, Washington.
Oh my God.
Have you been there?
You know that experience you were saying where you felt a very strong presence?
Uh-huh.
My wife and I had a very similar sensation when we were on that ranch.
So you've been there. Awesome. I don't meet too many people that actually have been there. So what you just described is kind of what I experienced there. And I've been there several times and I see the same thing. And the first time I went, we had this satellite tracking software on our computer, and we had an investigator that was his goal, to tell us what satellites were in the sky and what direction they were going. We would see these lights, and James Gillian, the owner of the ranch, would have this high-powered military flashlight, and he called it powering up. And we would see this bright light kind of cruise across the sky. He would blink his flashlight, and within seconds, this bright light, it would just get brighter. And then it would kind of go slow, and then it would go fast, and then it would just kind of zoom off. And that's one of the most memorable experiences I've ever had, because I just never really knew how to explain that. I mean, maybe why would a satellite respond? Like, if it was a satellite, why would it blink back? And why would it move so radically? Because satellites don't move like that.
Right. Did you spend the night there on the
I did
grounds?
several nights.
We-
Yeah, I stayed in the triangle
Oh, you did?
property.
Okay,
I
we
did,
camped.
yeah.
We camped in our tent on
Yeah.
the grounds. Yeah. At the time, was there a dog there when you were there?
Yes. Mhm.
A little like a Jack Russell kind of a dog?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's
I
so
have
funny.
pictures of him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
what year
that's
were you
like
there?
oh gosh, I can't remember now. It must have been, I wanna say 2010-ish? Two
Okay,
something like that?
I
I don't
can't
know, yeah.
remember which season, of Paranormal State. Our episode was called First Contact. I think we
Mhm.
filmed there in 2008, and then we held an event there in 2009, so I've been there twice. But it's just a
Okay,
place
yeah.
I always tell people about because, I mean, not only is it beautiful, but
Mhm.
the whole story with James is that, like, of course, he had a really bizarre near-death experience, and he kind of got information to where he saw this ranch before he even purchased it or actually saw it in real life. He had
Right.
vision of it. And just the fact that, it's at the base of Mount Adams and there's a correlation with mountains and things like that, to where they've seen
Mhm.
things. And they have the Bigfoot activity. So I think it's just like a plethora of things happen there that people can't explain. I want to go back so bad.
That's so funny. Not everybody would go running back.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, there's lights that are seen on, Mount Adams as well that
Mhm.
people, have witnessed over the years outside of the UFOs. Now, unfortunately, when we were there, James wasn't there.
Mm,
In fact, we had just crossed paths with him as we were leaving. He was just coming back to the compound. Uh, but there was a gentleman there who, was a true UFO believer, and he was doing what you're talking about with the lights, trying to like, and he was really, I think he was truly believing he was doing a CE5,
mhm.
and there was this light that was coming towards us, and for a moment, it's like, oh my god, is this actually happening? And then as I got closer and closer, he's like, hey, my friends are here, referring to the aliens, and then it turned out to be a helicopter, and then it kind of flew overhead and moved on. And I was like, but for a moment there, I thought, oh my gosh, are we making contact? But then it was a lesson for me too, to to not be so quick to believe,
Mhm.
because people do misunderstand phenomena. It does
Right.
happen. It doesn't mean the phenomena isn't real, but we can't just believe everything that people tell us. And I'm sure you've experienced that too. Have you ever been challenged where you think, oh my gosh, what do I say to this person, because you have some reason to believe that what they're seeing is not paranormal?
Yeah, I mean, one specific, incident I can remember was I investigated this hotel. It was like 130 years old, and the client reported that there was a certain room where people felt like they would be choked in this room. It happened to several
Mhm.
people. People always felt like something was following them down the stairs. They would feel like, what else? I'm trying to think. Basically, they had like a big anniversary party at this hotel. This is kind of
Okay.
where it all started. They had a huge anniversary party, and then all these people mysteriously died afterwards. And someone had a heart attack. So the woman that owned the hotel was like, I think whatever's here is causing this death. So we went in there, and right away we noticed that the steps were crooked. So when you're walking down the steps, it kind of creates a sensation that there's someone walking behind you. Like when you step down, it feels like there's pressure behind you and there's someone actually following you. So we did
Okay.
so many different experiments with that, and we kind of explained that to her. And then in the room where people reported feeling choked, we realized from our camera that was set up that there was a lot of dust and the poor circulation in the room. So we kind of attributed that because we had took turns sleeping in there, and we kind of had that sensation, but we noticed that, there's so much dust going in the room and on the
Yeah.
camera. So we kind of attributed that. And that's something the client had never thought of. As far as all the deaths, I don't really know how to explain that. It's probably just coincidental. But when we were there, We did this thing called dead time, where that was kind of where we would turn off the electronics. We'd try to have as little people as we could in the room, and that's when we would kind of attempt to communicate with whatever was there. And we had the client involved, who was the owner of the hotel. And at this moment, she told the spirit to leave. She said something specific to the spirit or whatever was there. And at that moment, the whole power in the building, all the electricity just went off at that exact moment. So they sent me outside, and I went down the block, and we realized that the whole block lost power. So we went back to the client to tell her, and she was so convinced that she was communicating with the spirit and that the place was really haunted that she didn't want to believe it. So a lot of times we would run into situations like that where people would sort of create things without really investigating or thinking of other possibilities or natural things. So that's always fun to me, to try to figure out how to debunk things. I've always been really into that.
And are you comfortable though talking to the client and saying, because I think some clients are kind of excited. I mean, most people would be, even if it's somewhat of a harrowing situation, that, oh my gosh, there's a ghost in my house. That's amazing.
Right.
Do they get attached to that idea, and how do you kind of, break it to them?
Sometimes it's not easy. Luckily for a lot of those cases, I wasn't the one that had to do that. Our main leader did, so I didn't really worry about it. But
You're like, hey, by the way, blah blah blah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not going to be the one to tell them this.
Yeah.
But no, you would run into clients that they wanted it to be paranormal, and a lot of times people would have something happening in their life that I think that they found it easier to blame the paranormal on it than to fix a problem in their life. It was like easier for them to blame it. And, people are so fascinated with this field. A lot of businesses specifically would try to use that to try to get people to come there and make money, by making stories or things like that, when it was really natural. We've definitely run into that. People would try to fake stuff to get us to go there. But
Sure.
all in all, I just think there's like a range of human experiences that just because they don't happen that often, people kind of attribute it to being paranormal.
Right. Muddy's Buddy says, was that a spirit, or did she will the power outage?
I don't know. The fact that the whole block, like literally the whole block, like I went to every building on the block, every business, and it happened to them as well. So I don't know. I would attribute it to being a natural occurrence.
And Rodrigo makes a good point. He says Mount Adams was where Kenneth Arnold saw the flying saucers in 1947. But that was
it Mount Adams or
Mount Adams, Washington?
Yeah. I keep thinking it was Mount Rainier, but I think it was Mount Adams now that I think about it.
Yeah. It's funny. We went to Mount Rainier as well. I do kind of confuse those on occasion. And Glacier Lake. I don't know why those three always kind of get mixed up in my head, because we did that like whole Pacific Northwest trip.
It's beautiful up there.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing.
I love it. Another thing I wanted to touch on. I'm trying to find my case notes for it so that I can include lots of detail. One time we did this episode where this woman, she was literally obsessed with getting EVPs. And she had found out that before she moved into her house, a woman named Mary had committed suicide in the garage. She had hung herself in the garage. And we kind of believed that the spirit was sort of oppressing the client, because this woman got to a point where, her mood would change, and she was so obsessed with recording and trying to catch these voices that when we were there, she was literally like recording movies onto a VHS tape and playing it back to listen for voices. So she got so obsessed with trying to communicate with this spirit that she would withdraw herself from her friends, and it was becoming a huge problem in her life. So that's just kind of an example of how, if you focus on it so much, you're kind of putting yourself in that situation where you're constantly engaging this so much that you're not, allowing whatever's there to move on. That was a really serious one. We even went and there was this shot, I think it was in Queens actually. And there was this shot of us taking all of her bags of tapes and recorders and just throwing them into the water. And of course she would just go out and buy new ones and continuously do it. But became an obsession. And, I remember doing another case too, where a woman, she still lived in the house that she had grown up in, and she was much, much older. And she was so used to this spirit being in her house that she considered it kind of to be like a part of her family. And when we tried to kind of separate her from it and kind of help whatever was there to kind of move on or stop the activity, she kind of didn't want it to happen. So those are just examples of how people can kind of get obsessed with this stuff and prevent things from, moving on, I guess.
Why is that? Why do they get so obsessed?
I don't know. I mean, I think I think of why I got into this field, and it's just like when something happens that you can't explain, it's just such a thrilling thing, that you want it to happen again and again. Obviously I'm not like obsessed with it. I can control it or whatever, but there's a lot of people that maybe they have like a void in their lives and it kind of fills something for them, or they don't want it not to happen. I don't know. I can't really figure that out. I think it's like different for everybody.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's I think filling a hole is a good point. In fact, in my documentary, one of the people I interviewed, Ray Hobbs from the UNX network, said exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
He says, he really believes there are a lot of people that are pursuing the paranormal because they're trying to fill a hole. And, a hole maybe that would have been filled by religion or any kind of belief system. I mean, there are plenty of atheists out there that are spiritually healthy. And for some reason, people need something. And I think the paranormal gives them a purpose. Like somehow proving that a ghost is real will, I guess, it comes down to those big questions, like you said earlier in the show. Why are we here? What is our life after death? The beginning and the end questions. I think that's true of even ufologists, many of whom, they swear up and down that they're just interested in, extraterrestrial life. But I think there's an element there where they think subconsciously that by proving that there's extraterrestrials, that there's just more to life than this planet. And to me, that says that maybe it's not enough.
Yeah,
right
I think
now. That was a bit of a diatribe there, but I think you kind of get what I'm going for.
Definitely, yeah. And I'm trying to think of what else I was gonna add. There's just so much with it. It's a very interesting field to work in because, again, everything is still sort of speculation. Everybody has their different ways of doing things. There's not like one universally accepted way to do things in this field, and it's cool because it kind of keeps pushing me forward in it to kind of make new discoveries and conduct different experiments to try to get things to happen. But it's definitely, people can take it out of control. Like they can get out of control with it in a way that I feel is like very unhealthy. That it's not a healthy thing. Always thinking about death and dealing with death and obsessing over things. It brings me back to like studying spiritualism when, people first started getting into the Ouija board because it kind of gave them a way to deal with their grief, when they would try to contact their husbands that died in the Civil War and things like that. So it's, again, that kind of gets to like filling some kind of void in their life.
Is there a healthy aspect to this? Is it healthy to try and contact our past loved ones, or do we need to let go?
Again, it's pretty different for everybody, but
well, I mean, what about for you? I mean, how would you feel, with having the experience that you have now?
I mean, I definitely, I know a lot of like the best psychics in the field, and I've definitely utilized them here and there. And one particular one, that I had never met before came up to me at an event and just started, telling me some things. And I was talking to some people, and then I didn't give him a lot of information, but I was like, hey, I had someone very close to me pass away, and just let me know if you like pick up on anything. And I didn't say anything specifically. And just the level of detail that this psychic picked up on my friend's personality and certain things that he said, directly related in a way that there's like no way he could have ever known this. So in that moment, I was kind of like, this is really neat, because this person gave me a very specific message that no one else could have given me. And I knew that this psychic was really good, and they were actually contacting this person. So I think, depending on the situation, I think it can be useful, and it can give people a lot of relief if they have lost a loved one. You just have to make sure you get a good psychic, because there's a lot of you shouldn't take everything the psychics say, seriously. But I've had the experience to deal with like a lot of different psychics. So, but yeah,
well, also there are different levels of psychics, right? I mean, some have better abilities than others, but I guess there's a line, right, where you're like, okay, this person's not just not able to communicate, that maybe they're faking it. You've experienced that?
Yeah, I mean, when we would bring in new psychics on Paranormal State, before we would start filming, we'd kind of test them, and we'd kind of change our appearance. I dress very loud with a lot of color and patterns, and you can tell that I have a very bubbly personality and very positive. So we would kind of change that and do little experiments to see what they picked up on. And that was always kind of fun, a fun little experiment to do. But going back to like, working in this field and how it kind of changes you, I would say that, after all my years of doing this and researching, I would say it definitely makes me value life more, because you realize how short life is and how you should really take advantage of every situation that you can, because you just don't know, So that's one thing I've definitely taken away from this.
Do you think there's a future where Heather Taddy is leading her own paranormal investigation show?
I would like that. Yeah. I think that would be really neat. And I hope that happens someday.
I think that would be great. Because, even watching Alien Highway, I was like, well, there should be more Heather Taddy going on here.
Yeah, right.
And especially because, you're dealing with such weird stuff. I mean, you do have years of experience with it. And when given a chance, like on Jennifer Marshall's show, it was obvious, like, you have knowledge, and, you were able to express your research in a way that's succinct and understandable and digestible. So it's perfect for television. So I, for one, would definitely like to see a show where you're the lead investigator, or at least a co-investigator, right, with someone else. And no offense against Alien Highway people, love y'all. Just throw that out there. But also, yeah, absolutely. And so really quick before we go, I just want to drop a couple of things. So Cryptic Bash in Morgantown, West Virginia, Saturday, August 6th. You are going to be there. Yep. That's in 2 days. West Virginia State Penitentiary Paracon, August 13th. Grand Midway Hotel in Winbar, Pennsylvania, with Dustin Perry, September 3rd and 4th. And Hotel Josephine in Kansas with Michael Cook from the Alaskan Triangle, September 8th and 11th. You have a busy season.
I do. Yeah, I do. I love it. I love traveling. I love going to different places. Obviously, a lot of places this year, especially Hotel Josephine and Grand Midway Hotel, I've never been to. So I always love it when I get invited to go to a place I've never been. So.
Right. Okay. Do you go by Taddy over Heather?
Yeah, most people call me Taddy.
Taddy? Okay.
Yeah. Heather is such an 80s name. So I like Taddy. It's unique.
That's so
It's
funny.
usually what most people call me.
So Taddy is the 21st century name. Got it.
Yeah.
All right. If you could leave us with any, with one thought before we go, Taddy, what would it be?
Never stop searching for the answers. Never stop, looking to the skies. And I don't know. I think there's more out there than we realize. It's just trying to figure out the proper way to prove it to people and figure it all out.
All right. Well, good luck on your continued investigation, Taddy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Thank you for being on my show. I appreciate it as well. If you want to find out more about Heather, gosh, I can't wait till this cold thing is done. Go to heathertaddy.com. Heathertaddy, TADDY.com, and check out all her upcoming engagements, past shows. Also, Alien Highway, you can actually see for free right now. If you have Roku, Fire Stick, Apple TV, it's on the Travel Channel app. Just download it and you can watch the whole first season, right?
Yeah, it's also on Discovery Plus, so you can catch it on there.
Oh, okay.
Same
there you
with, I guess start on 4 episodes of Portals to Hell in season 2, and you can also watch those on Discovery Plus as well.
Nice. All right. Thanks so much, Heather, and thank you everybody for joining us tonight. These are my favorite conversations with people who are truly passionate and live and breathe these topics. Thank you very much to Race Hobbs from KUNX, the UNX network. He is a fantastic guy who got me started on KGRA, brought me over to the UNX network, and Margie K for starting the UNX network. Thank you to her and her lifetime's worth of work and writings and research into the paranormal. So happy to be part of that family. And thanks again to Heather Taddy for joining us. This is Alan B. Smith. If you like this channel and this program, please subscribe to Mystic Lounge on YouTube. That's youtube.com/Mystic Lounge, and click the notification bell and help this channel grow. I will see you all on the inverted, upside down, live in the mystery.